Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Chof Ches Amud Beis, 3 lines from the top. The Gemara continues to discuss various food items that can be used for an Eruv or not. The Gemara makes a distinction in regards to that which is unripened grain. Rav says that if it grows in a garden where everybody would eat such grain, even though it's unripened and it's still green, you can make your Eruv with that, otherwise not. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Zeira, ki hava chalish migirse. Rabbi Zeira was tired from his learning. That means he could not continue to learn. He needed to take a break. What did Rabbi Zeira do with his break? Hava ozel v'yosif apischa de Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami. He said, I'll go to the entranceway, the Beis HaMedrash of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami. In other words, he wanted to then utilize the opportunity, even though he could not learn, but he wanted to mekayim the following mitzvah. Says the Gemara, Omar ki nafki va'ayli rabbanon eku mekamayhu ve'akabel behus agro. When the rabbis will go out and inside of the Beis HaMedrash, I'll be by the entranceway, I'll be able to then stand up for them. After all, the Torah says, Mivnei seva tokum, in regards to an elderly person, one has an obligation to get up and stand up for them. And then it says, "V'hadarta pnei zokein," that when there's a Talmid Chacham that comes within your Daled Amos, you also have a mitzvah di'araisa to stand up for them. So Rabbi Zeir said, let me utilize the opportunity to mekayim the mitzvah of v'hadarta pnei zokein. Nofak osa yinuka debei Rav. A child came out of the Beis HaMedrash. Omar lei, my agmaroch raboch. Rabbi Zeir said to the child, what did your Rebbe teach you? Omar lei, kishus borei priadomo, chozi shahakol niya bidvoroi. Hops have the bracha of borei pri ha'adomo, and that which is unripened grain, which is still green, chozis has the bracha of shahakol niya bidvoroi. Omar lei, Rav Zeir returned to him and he said, Adarabba, quite the contrary, ipcha mistabro. The opposite is mistaber. Hai me'aro kamirve, v'hai me'aviro kamirve. This gets its sustenance from the air, referring to the hops, and this, referring to the unripened grain, gets its sustenance from the ground. And therefore, the hops that get sustenance from the air should have bracha of shehakol niyeh bidvoroi, whereas the unripened grain, which gets its sustenance from the ground, should have the bracha of bari pri adoma. Says the Gemara, "Vehilchasa ki yenuka debei Rav," and the halacha is like the child who came out of the Beis HaMedrash. My taima, asked the Gemara, what's the reason? Hi gemar peri v'hai lav gemar peri. Answers the Gemara, because this kshus, this hops, is already a finished fruit, whereby you can say the bracha borei pri ha'adama, whereas the unripened grain, which is still green, you cannot say it's a fruit yet, and therefore it's shehakol nihiyeh bidvoroi. Umay de ka'amris hay me'ara karovi v'hay me'avira karovi, and that which you said, that this, referring to the chazis, gets its sustenance from the ground, and the hops, after all, doesn't have a sharish that goes into the ground, it gets its sustenance from the air. Lohi, it's not so. Kishus nami me'ara karovi. Even the hops, though it doesn't have the sharish that goes into the ground, but it goes onto a plant. The hakachazin and the katlina lalahizmisa umaisi keshusa. When you would cut the hizmi plant that it grows on, so you'll see that it will die. So you see that it gets its sustenance from the ground and not from the air. Says the Gemara weiter, ubekafniyos ein ma'arvin. Rav had also stated that kafniyos, these are the undeveloped tamarim, dates that are still unripened. He says you cannot use that for your Eruv. Ask the Gemara, is that so? V'hatanya. It says, kor nikach bekesef meiser. Kor is the top of the palm tree that initially grows and it's soft, and then it becomes hardened. It's known as the hearts of palm. So it says over here that this kor, in the Gemara in Brachos, it has an aleph at the end, kara. It says over here that the kesef meiser can be used to acquire this kor. Ve'ein metamet tumas oichelin, but it cannot then require the tomb of oichelin because it's not nechshav a pri, it's not nechshav an oichel. it's still considered to be an eitz. Ubekafniyos nikchois bekesav meiser. The kafniyos, which we said is undeveloped tmorim, dates, that can be acquired with the meiser kesef, umetamois tumas oichel, and it does become tamei as oichel because it is considered to be an oichel. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kor harehu ke'eit lekol dvorov el shenika bekesav meiser. Rabbi Yehuda says kor is eight, and therefore doesn't have the designation of an oichel, but it can be acquired with kesef meiser. This thing we'll have to explain what the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama is. He goes on to say, ukafniyos harein kipri lekol divrayim el shepturos min meiser. The undeveloped dates, they are like peiros in all matters. However, he goes on to say, they're undeveloped, and therefore they're not going to be chayiv in meiser, because it's not a nigmar hapri. Al kolpanim, what you see from here is that kafniyos are indeed considered to be an oichel. So why can you not use the kafniyos, even though it's true they are undeveloped, they're still unripened, but why can't you use these dates for your eruv? Answers the Gemara, hasam b'denist choni. The difference is there's dates, the kafrios that grow on the zochar tree, and those that grow on a nekeva tree. Those that grow on a zochar tree, those are the kafnios that never become tmorim, and therefore they themselves are considered to be a gemar pri. Whereas the female kafnios, when they're undeveloped as kafnios, because they're going to ultimately grow into proper dates. So the distinction that the Gemara wants to make is that which Rav said, that you cannot use kafrios for your eruv, is talking about those kafrios that are still undeveloped will become then tmorim. Those you cannot use. Ihochi asked the Gemara, if so, that this Bryce is talking about those kafrios that grow in a sense that they're going to be then a finished product, they never become tmorim. So if that's the case, then why are they pater from meiser? The only reason they should be pater from meiser is because it's not a gemar pri, but over here we're saying it's a gemar. Vehatanya, and it states in the Bryce, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, lo huzkuru pagi beis yoni ela le'ine meiser bilvad. And Rabbi Yehuda says that they did not mention the Beis HaMedrash, the undeveloped bisyoini, unless it was in regards to the Meiser Bilvad. And when was it stated? By Pagi bisyoini va'ahini tutuvina, which is Chayvim Meiser. These two items, the undeveloped figs of bisoini and the undeveloped dates of tovina, they were indeed Chayiv and Meiser, because they are the finished product. So therefore, why would then he not be Chayiv and Meiser if we're talking about those kofriyos that are indeed a finished product? Elo, says the Gemara, you're right. La'olam la ben nischani. It's not bis nischani that we're talking about over here in the Brisa. Ule'inyan tumas oichlin shani. The reason why over here it states gabe tumas oichlin, that by tumas oichelin, it's not considered to be an oichel to become tamei, but it is because here it's different. Sorry, the reason why it's considered to be tumas oichelin, that a kafrios would indeed become tamei as an oichel, only it doesn't become chayiv and meiser, is because it is considered to be still an oichel. Kidam Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Yochanan stated, hoyel v'roi lematkon ayidei ha'ur, hachanami hoyel v'yochel lematkon ayidei ha'ur. Rabbi Yochanan said somewhere else that since the item is able to be then sweetened and edible through the fire, so too the way of then being mesaken, this would also then making it through the fire, it'll also become edible. So therefore, this is going to be considered to be an oichel, whereby it'll become tamei als tumas oichelin. Only it's not a gemar pri to mechayiv in meiser. Ask the Gemara, v'heichan itmad Rabbi Yochanan. Where did Rabbi Yochanan make this statement that ayidei the ur, through the fire, it will then sweeten the item, the pri? Aho, the Tanya, like it says in the following brayso, he stated, shkedim Hamorim, those bitter almonds, ketanim chayavim gedolim pturim. When they are small, they are potter, because these are still when they're small, they're going to be chayiv, and gedolim, they're going to be potter, because when they're small, they're going to be now edible. When they get bigger, then they're going to be too bitter to be eaten. Misukim, when they're sweet, it's the exact opposite. Gedolim are going to be chayavin, ketanim are pturim. Only when they develop to be gedolim will they be sweet. But while they're still small, they're going to be bitter. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yosi, Oimer, Mishum Aviv, Zeh v'zeh liftor. He says both this and that are going to be potter. In other words, even those that are morim, those almonds that are bitter, will also going to be potter, even when they are going to be small. Whereas the others said that both this and that are going to be chiyuv. Rabbi Eloi, Rabbi Chanina b'tzipori, k'divrei ha'omer zeh v'zeh liftar. He paskin like the one who said that they're both potter, meaning that the bitter ones, when they are small, they're undeveloped, and when they are big, they're bitter. So therefore, both of them are going to be potter from meiser. Ulaman the Omar zeh v'zeh lechiyuv l'may chazi, but the one that said both this and that are going to be chayiv in meiser. So what is it fitting? We're talking about the gedolim, the ones that are big. How is it going to be fitting? After all, they're going to be bitter. Omar Rabbi Yochanan hoyil v'roy lematkan ayidei or. This is where Rabbi Yochanan stated his statement that since through the fire it will become sweetened, therefore it's considered to be an oichel. Omar Mar stated, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, going back to the statement that Rabbi Yehuda said, Kor harehu ke'et lekol dvar of ela shenika bekezem ma'aseh. Going back to the heart of palm, that he said is the din of being like an eitz lekol davar, but is going to then be something you can use for your kesef, your meiser kesef with. Ask the Gemara, isn't this the Tanakama? Hainu Tanakama, what's the distinction between the two? That's exactly what the Tanakama had stated. Omar Abaye, Shlokoi v'tignoi ika benayu. When you cook it very well, or you then fry it in oil, then that's going to be the distinction. The Tanakam will say it's going to be therefore an oichel if you do that. Otherwise, Rabbi Yehuda says that even with shloko and tignoi, is not going to be an oichel. Maskif lo Rava. Rava asks on this, are you going to say that Rabbi Yehuda would not agree that if you're shlokoi, if you cook it very well, or tignoi, or you then cooked it in oil, you fried it, it will not become something that's considered to be edible and will have the status as being something that is an oichel? Mi'ika leman da omar shlok Shloka v'tigno loy. Is there opinion that says that that's not going to be good enough? After all, v'hatanya, it states in the Brisa, ha'or v'hashilya ein metamin tumas oichelin. They do not become tumas oichelin, or which is the hide of the animal, and the shilya. Rava or sheshloka v'shilya shechishev aleim tmeim mitumas oichelin. But the or that you cook very well, or the shilya, which you're choshev, in other words, it's still edible, but normally is disgusting, not normally eaten. If you then consider it to be something that's going to be an oichel, then it will have then the designation of tumas oichelin. It's going to be an oichel of a tumas oichelin. So therefore we see that even hides, which was never something that was edible before it was cooked very well, it can be considered to be an oichel of a tumas oichelin. Then certainly when it comes to this of the core, which was somewhat edible before it became totally hardened, that certainly would be then considered to be a oichel aydei shlokos v'tignoin. Says the Gemara, Ella, you're right. Omar Rava ika benayu brocha. Really, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda would not be choylek on the Tanakama if indeed we're talking about shlokos and tignoin. What is the distinction between the two opinions? Brocha, as follows. What bracha do you make on each one? The itmar kar. It says, Rav Yehuda Omar Borei Priyadama, Ushmomar Shakon Yebidvoroi. Rav Yehuda would say the bracha is borei priya adama, and Shmuel says the bracha shehakol niyeh bidvoroi. In other words, Rav Yehuda states that the bracha is borei priya adama because, after all, this is something that is edible. Whereas Shmuel says, since it becomes hardened, the bracha shehakol niyeh bidvoroi. Rav Yehuda Omar borei priya adama oichlehu. It's food. It's oichel. You can't say bar priya adama because it's going to get hardened. Therefore, the bracha is shehakol. Omar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda shininav. Shmuel turns to his comrade Rav Yehuda and says, "Smart one, sharp one. Kevasech mistabro. It's mistabro like you're saying that the bracha should be indeed bar priya adama. The hot's nine shesoifer lahakshois umarvichin analei bar priya adama. Because when it comes to radishes, even though they are going to ultimately become hardened, the bracha on them is bar priya adama. So we see a proof like you that indeed, even though it's going to become hardened, but right now we make a bracha of bar priya adama. Velohi says the Gemara, that's not so. V'tznoin nitei inchi adaita de pugla. Because when it comes to radishes, they plant it in order that with the intention of eating it when it is soft. And therefore the bracha is bar priya adama. Dikla lo nitei inchi adaita de kara. But when it comes to the palm tree, a person does not plant the kara in order to then eat it, because it will then ruin the tree. The after of the Kal says Shmuel Rav Yehuda, even though that Shmuel praised Rav Yehuda, still we say Hilchasa Kavase de Shmuel. The halacha would be the bracha is shehakol nihiyeh bidvaroi.